Imagine being denied entry to a hotel you own. What would you do? Today's story is about David, a billionaire CEO whose patience turned a humiliating moment into absolute justice. Stay tuned. David stepped through the revolving doors of the Sterling Crown Hotel, his polished shoes making soft clicks against the marble floors. The lobby stretched before him in all its opulent glory. Golden chandeliers glinted above. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the faint aroma of fine coffee, and polished marble reflected the bustle of staff scurrying between guests and luggage carts. He moved alone, unaccompanied by assistants, bodyguards, or any visible sign of his authority. That was exactly how he wanted it. No badges, no introductions, no whispers of power preceding him. Tonight, he wanted to see the hotel as it really was. For weeks, David had received reports, subtle, often dismissed, that something was off. Some guests were treated differently, delays in service seemed intentional, and murmurs of dismissiveness floated through anonymous reviews. He wanted proof, and from the moment he stepped into the lobby, the tension in the air told him he would find it. As he approached the front desk, he noticed the polished young clerk whose smile faltered the moment he caught sight of David. The clerk's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, an almost imperceptible flicker of suspicion that spoke volumes. David kept his composure, leaning casually on the counter as if he were any other guest. "Room service, please," he said with calm politeness. "Room 3901. The clerk looked him over once more, brows furrowed, muttered something under his breath, and then vanished toward the back without greeting him or confirming the request. There was no apology, no procedural check, nothing that a normal guest could expect. David's gaze followed the clerk with quiet scrutiny. The lobby continued its rhythm around him, guests chatting, phones tapping, the hum of polite conversations masking the growing tension that only he seemed to notice. A few moments later, the manager arrived, Miranda Doyle, known for her exacting standards and sharp tongue. She moved with the kind of confidence only someone who believed in their absolute control could possess, scanning him like a threat rather than a customer. "What's your name again?" she asked, her voice sharp and deliberate, designed to unsettle. "David Turner," he replied evenly, his tone unwavering. Betraying no hint of offense, Miranda leaned closer to the screen in front of her, her fingers tapping aggressively on the keyboard. "I'm not seeing authorization here," she said, her eyes narrowing, suspicion dripping from every word. She took his card with 2 fingers, almost as if touching it physically degraded her, and whispered to the clerk, "Flag this." Possible fraud. David said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply watched, calm and deliberate, noting every subtle movement, every hesitation, every glance the staff exchanged behind his back. It was clear they had already made up their minds, and yet none of them realized the man standing in front of them was more than capable of turning the entire situation around. The clerk returned, projecting his voice loudly as if announcing a victory to the lobby. "We've seen this before. Fake names, fake cards, people trying to sneak into premium floors." Some guests paused mid-conversation. A woman adjusting her scarf by the fountain frowned. A teenager lifted his phone, whispering, "This doesn't look right." Whispers began to circulate through the crowd, the first ripples of suspicion spreading like a low tide. Miranda's voice rose deliberately, carrying through the lobby. "Sir, room service is for verified occupants only." "I am verified," David replied evenly. His calm tone slicing through her theatrics, Miranda laughed. Short and rehearsed, a sound meant to intimidate. "Not anymore," she said, waving at security. "Escort him out. We're not wasting time on this." 2 officers moved quickly, gripping David's arms as though he were a threat rather than a guest requesting dinner. Metal cuffs clicked around his wrists, the sound echoing through the lobby like a premature verdict. Gasps followed, some guests exchanging uneasy glances, others holding up their phones, recording the unfolding scene. David's expression remained unreadable, his silence heavier than any argument, more unsettling than resistance. The crowd watched, a mix of disbelief and curiosity rippling through them. He wasn't struggling, wasn't panicking, he was simply observing, cataloging every misstep, every assumption, every moment of arrogance displayed by the staff. Miranda, confident in her perceived power, leaned back slightly, folding her arms smugly. "People like him walk in, demand service, and expect us to bow," she declared, letting her words strike like hammers against the marble walls. Some guests shifted in their seats, whispering. Some lifted their phones higher. Yet David remained motionless, his eyes calm, measuring, waiting. His presence alone became a quiet challenge, an invisible pressure building in the room, as the lobby began to feel less like a place of luxury and more like a courtroom, where judgment was being rendered without trial. The first part of the night ended with David silently recording everything, not on a device, but in memory, and the hotel staff unknowingly laying the foundation for their own downfall. The stage was set, tension thick in the air, and the luxurious lobby, once a symbol of pride, had become a battlefield of arrogance, bias, and impending reckoning. David remained calm as the officers guided him a few steps away from the front desk, his hands cuffed but his posture relaxed, eyes scanning the lobby with quiet precision. Every gesture of Miranda Doyle, every muttered word of the staff, and every reaction from the crowd was catalogued in his mind. He had expected resistance, he had expected humiliation, but what he hadn't expected was how eager they were to expose themselves. Each accusation, each attempt to assert authority, only strengthened his resolve. Miranda folded her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips, convinced of her dominance. "We have to cancel his booking immediately," she commanded the clerk, whose hands trembled slightly as he navigated the system. With a few quick keystrokes, he tried to erase David's reservation, to delete his confirmation as if doing so could erase the man himself. The officers glanced between each other, uncertainty creeping into their movements. But they followed orders, anxious to maintain the illusion of control. Guests in the lobby leaned forward, phones already raised, the first few live streams going public. Comments began to explode across social media feeds, small murmurs growing into digital roars. "This doesn't feel right," a voice whispered from the corner near the fountain. "He's being profiled," typed another. The words spread like wildfire, carried from phone to phone, unnoticed by Miranda, who remained fixated on her perceived triumph. David's calmness, however, was deliberate. He didn't flinch at the cuffs, he didn't argue or raise his voice. He let Miranda's impatience and the staff's mistakes speak for themselves. Their arrogance, their assumption that he was powerless, would be the instrument of their undoing. And it was working. The tension in the lobby thickened, a tangible energy pressing against the luxurious walls, as if the marble and crystal chandeliers themselves were waiting for the inevitable shift. Meanwhile, Elena, a junior concierge who had been silently watching, noticed something that made her heart skip. On her screen, David's booking still glowed, confirmed, valid, VIP override. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, afraid to speak up, worried about repercussions. But the discrepancy gnawed at her. The system clearly contradicted the false narrative Miranda was enforcing, and every second David was restrained. The weight of injustice grew heavier. The crowd's murmurs evolved into audible questions. Some guests stepped closer, unsure whether to intervene, unsure what they were witnessing. Others recorded silently, the digital proof accumulating in real time. Cameras focused, phones zoomed in on David's composed face, capturing the contrast between his serene authority and the chaotic overconfidence of the staff. Miranda, still unaware, raised her voice, trying to assert control. "Security. Make sure he leaves immediately. We will not tolerate this kind of behavior in our hotel." David allowed a slow exhale, a deliberate pause that carried the weight of patience and contained the promise of revelation. Every movement, every hesitation by the staff was noted in his mind, and now he prepared to act. The officers, tense and uncomfortable, shifted from foot to foot. They were beginning to realize the imbalance of the situation, though their training and Miranda's orders held them in place. David's silence was like gravity, pulling the room toward awareness even before he spoke. Phones continued to capture every detail. Comments escalated into disbelief. How can they treat someone like this? Is this really happening? He hasn't done anything wrong. The digital crowd, unfiltered and instantaneous, added pressure to the live scenario, turning the lobby into a stage with millions of virtual witnesses. Elena's gaze met David's across the lobby, recognition flickering. She understood he knew the truth and that he had seen every misstep. His calm, composed demeanor was not passive. It was strategic. He was letting the staff expose themselves, letting the crowd witness the arrogance and bias that had gone unchecked for too long. And now, at this pivotal moment, he was ready to reveal the truth. With the room brimming with tension, the officers still restraining him, and the live audience watching in real time, David's presence shifted from subdued to commanding without a word. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Every whisper, every murmur, every skeptical glance now carried anticipation. The quiet authority in his posture hinted at a revelation that would shatter assumptions, reorder power, and expose those who had misjudged him. The suspense was palpable. The crowd knew something was about to happen, and even Miranda, despite her overconfidence, felt a flicker of unease she couldn't name. David's hands remained cuffed, his voice still unraised, but the promise in his calm eyes was clear. What had begun as an ordinary dinner request had transformed into a reckoning, and the balance of power in the Sterling Crown Hotel was about to shift dramatically. Every element in the lobby, the murmuring staff, the recording guests, the live streams, and the silent witness Elena, was a part of the unfolding storm. And David, patient and deliberate, was at the center, preparing to tip the scales. David's hand moved subtly, tapping his phone against the cuffed wrist, careful not to draw attention. A single discreet touch activated the internal line, connecting him to Rachel, his trusted assistant who monitored every system in the hotel chain. "Rachel," he said quietly, voice low but deliberate. "Log this moment. Activate protocol." The phone responded instantly, linking him to the internal systems, verifying every detail the staff had tried to deny. "Identity confirmed," Rachel replied, crisp and unwavering. "VIP override active. Owner clearance verified. Security breach logged." The words, though calm over the phone, carried the weight of authority and inevitability. David inhaled, his gaze sweeping across the lobby. The officers holding him paused, uncertain, their eyes flicking between the screens and the man they had restrained only moments ago. The first whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Wait, he's the owner?" one guest murmured, barely audible. Phones tilted higher, live stream zooming in as disbelief spread. A wave of realization struck those who had recorded and observed. The man they had assumed powerless, the guest they had publicly humiliated, held the ultimate authority. Cameras captured every detail, every expression, preserving the truth in real time. Miranda's face, once smug and commanding, drained of color. Her lips parted, as though to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Staff and officers alike froze, the arrogant certainty that had guided their actions dissolving into panic and confusion. Every accusation, every harsh judgment they had thrown at David, now hovered against them like a mirror reflecting their misdeeds. David raised his voice, measured but firm, cutting through the murmurs and the ambient sounds of the lobby. "You tore up my booking. You accused me of fraud in a hotel I built. That is not a misunderstanding. That is misconduct." His words reverberated across the polished marble floors, reaching every corner of the space, leaving no one uncertain about the gravity of the situation. Gasps echoed, some guests leaning closer, some recording with renewed focus. The officers, still holding him lightly, exchanged glances. They had acted on orders, yet now they stood amid an unraveling authority. They had restrained the very person whose voice alone could dictate their positions, their careers, even their presence in the hotel. David, sensing their hesitation, allowed the words to settle, giving weight to every syllable, making the silence that followed almost unbearable. "I am terminating," David continued, voice steady, deliberate. "The manager, the clerk, and every staff member who participated in this misconduct. Effective immediately." At the command, alarms subtly beeped in the background as Rachel executed the system protocols. Computers flashed red, access denied. Swipe cards failed. The lobby was caught between chaos and revelation, technology enforcing justice instantly. Elena, standing quietly near the concierge desk, finally found her voice. Her eyes met David's, and with a subtle nod, she affirmed the truth that only she had recognized. For her, the recognition was simple. Honesty had been acknowledged, and integrity rewarded. The officers slowly unclipped the cuffs from David's wrists, stammering apologies, faces flushed with embarrassment and relief. The crowd reacted in waves. Initial shock melted into cheers, applause erupting spontaneously, blending with gasps and murmurs. Phones and live streams captured every movement, every word, every dramatic turn, ensuring that the moment of justice would be witnessed far beyond the hotel walls. Guests raised cameras high, their excitement mingling with relief that fairness had prevailed in real time. Miranda's attempts at protest crumbled under the weight of undeniable authority. "You can't do this," she stammered, voice strained, eyes wide with disbelief. David's gaze remained calm, precise, unwavering. "Consider this balance," he said quietly, but with a power that resonated through the space. His measured demeanor contrasted sharply with her panicked movements, highlighting the strategic patience that had carried him through the humiliation. As the officers stepped aside, David's presence commanded the room without a single display of anger or vengeance. The lobby, once a scene of embarrassment for him, had become a theater of accountability, where prejudice and arrogance had met consequence. Elena's support, subtle yet visible, underscored the message. Honesty and courage are noticed, even in silence. David turned slowly, surveying the crowd, the cameras, the stunned staff, and the officers who had followed misguided orders. The digital records, the applause, the murmurs of relief, all bore witness to what dignity looked like when patience met prejudice. In that moment, authority and justice intertwined, and the lobby, gleaming and opulent, had transformed into a testament of retribution carried out with precision. The storm of chaos had been tamed, and David, composed yet victorious, stood at the center, the embodiment of control, patience, and unshakable power. David straightened his jacket, stepping forward as the crowd slowly settled, eyes fixed on him. The lobby, once a whirlwind of chaos, now hummed with a tense calm, all attention directed toward the man who had transformed humiliation into authority. Guests held their phones lower, some lowered their brows, absorbing the weight of the moment. Cameras still recorded, capturing every nuance, every measured gesture. David's voice, calm but commanding, filled the space. "Tonight, you witnessed more than a confrontation," he began. "You witnessed patience, dignity, and the power of observing before reacting. Silence is not weakness. It is strategy. It allows clarity. It allows precision. And it allows justice to be served exactly where it is deserved." His words carried through the grand lobby, reaching even those who had initially doubted him. The staff, once confident in their control, now stood exposed, aware that every misstep, every act of arrogance had been catalogued not just by systems, but by witnesses and memory. Officers who had executed orders without question exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that obedience without discernment could place them in precarious situations. David's presence was a quiet reminder that authority is not simply a title. It is how one wields it, ethically and decisively. Guests murmured among themselves, some nodding, others whispering admiration, while live streams continued to transmit the scene globally. Across the digital world, viewers saw the stark contrast between panic and composure, between prejudice and fair judgment. The ripple effect was already beginning. Hotel staff elsewhere would see that misconduct, discrimination, and arrogance were no longer safe in spaces where integrity mattered. Elena, standing near the back, allowed herself a small smile, feeling recognized for her courage and honesty. Her quiet support had been noted, and now she shared in the unspoken acknowledgement that doing the right thing, even silently, mattered. David's gaze swept over the terminated staff, their faces a mixture of disbelief, shame, and grudging understanding. The clerk, once trembling with the thrill of power, now looked small under the weight of his actions. Miranda's arrogance had completely collapsed. The manager's posture was defensive, her usual sharp tone muted by the reality that she had misjudged the man before her. Justice, David had demonstrated, is not delivered through panic or vengeance, but through strategy, observation, and measured response. Every action, every word, and every decision that led to tonight's events had been carefully recorded, both digitally and in memory, leaving an undeniable record of accountability. He continued, his voice steady, carrying through the lobby like a lesson written in marble and glass. In any organization, in any community, prejudice can creep in quietly. Assumptions about who belongs and who does not can cloud judgment. But today, we learned that accountability is not optional. It is essential. It ensures dignity. It ensures fairness. And it ensures that the values of respect and integrity are upheld, no matter the circumstances. Guests, staff, and observers felt the weight of his words. The hotel, a symbol of luxury and exclusivity, had become a classroom in ethical leadership. Cameras captured the nods of understanding, the quiet acceptance of responsibility, and the applause that now rose organically from the crowd. The digital record continued to spread, a visual reminder to the wider world that leadership is not simply about control, but about enforcing fairness even when power is challenged. With deliberate grace, David stepped toward the revolving doors, his hands now free, shoulders squared, and head held high. The lobby, transformed from a stage of chaos into one of reflection and celebration, followed his lead. Applause swelled once more, a mixture of admiration, relief, and acknowledgement that justice had been served. He did not rush. He did not gloat. Each step reflected calm authority, showing that true leadership is measured not by fear it inspires, but by the dignity it upholds. As he exited, David offered a final glance to Elena and the remaining guests, a nod that carried both recognition and encouragement. His presence lingered even as he passed through the doors, a reminder that ethical leadership, patience, and courage can overturn arrogance and prejudice. The lobby, now quieter, absorbed the lesson. Injustice, when witnessed and addressed with clarity, does not last. Respect for guests, accountability for staff, and courage in leadership are principles that endure. Tonight, the Sterling Crown Hotel would remember not the confusion or the handcuffs, but the authority wielded with integrity, the patience that turned humiliation into triumph, and the legacy of a leader who ensured that fairness was more than a concept. It was action. David left the building with the poise of a man who had seen injustice, waited and delivered justice precisely and decisively, leaving a lobby of witnesses inspired, cameras filled with evidence, and a message clear to all. Ethical leadership matters, and wrongdoing eventually meets accountability,